Well, on this FHS podcast, I'm delighted to have Stephen Greenway, the CEO of flyadeal. Stephen, thank you for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
And Stephen, also it's great to have you on board FHS Saudi around the corner in Riyadh, speaking about the importance of aviation in our industry. It's good to have the likes of yourself speaking because it's so important for us in the hospitality, investment, real estate space to know what's going on and what you're planning going forward. But Stephen, a little bit about you before we move on to flyadeal. Uh, tell us Tell us about your story and, moving to Saudi. You moved to Saudi 15 months ago in January 2024. Um, how's the experience been so far, both personally and professionally? And what stands out most about your first year in the kingdom?
A lot to unpack, I suppose. Yeah, I've been a year and a half on the ground, and looking forward to FHS, by the way. This has been a year in the planning, so looking forward to having it in our backyard in terms of Riyadh, so we'll see everyone next week. In terms of my sort of career, I've been an airline person for 20 plus 25 years. I've done a few deviations in certain things like loyalty and security, won't go there, but for the most part, airlines for over 25 years. And anyone who's an airline person knows you travel a lot, you move around a lot. This is actually the 14th country I've lived in and worked in, and I suppose I have a slightly different perspective than someone who has not done that, been exposed to that. I think the journey for me in terms of Saudi Arabia has been one of the best way to describe it is surprise. Surprise in terms of there's this preordained view of Saudi Arabia from outside in. And a lot of that is just simply not true and doesn't hold any water anymore. I think that Saudi Arabia today versus Saudi Arabia, say 5, even 10 years ago is utterly different. And I can vouch for that. I worked in the kingdom 15, 16. I didn't live here. I did some business here, and it was just very difficult to do business. It was very difficult to access the country. You couldn't come here on a holiday or a leisure purpose or anything like that. Now completely opened up. And as a consequence of that, the country is changing dramatically, day by day. And when you're on the ground like I am here in Jeddah, it's not the capital of the Riyadh's obviously the capital where the conference is next week, but when you're just on the ground here, you can see change, tangible change on a daily basis. Be that government policy to physical infrastructure to discourse in terms of the population, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's quite amazing. So for me, it's been I think the phrase I would use is eye-opening and pleasantly so. Really, really enjoyable 18 months. So it's probably one of the best decisions in my career that I've made in my whole airline career.
Well, how exciting. And you've worked on a number of startup airlines in the past with Scoot and Swoop. How does this is like being involved in another startup. What are the experiences between them?
Yeah, I think, and by the way, for your viewers, I never named Scoot or Swoop, so I wasn't being lazy and just, stuck with the S name or something like that. I inherited those, but I think what I did inherit here was actually an airline that was already 30 aircraft when I came on board. So it wasn't a startup. We'd been up and running for 6 years. But what it was doing was we're on the precipice of that next big growth spurt up to 100 aircraft, and that's the journey that we're on now. When I started, we were 30. We're now 40. We'll be 44 by the end of the year, and off you go to 98, including wide bodies, which I'm happy to talk about. But the journey here is slightly different. It's an airline that was up and running. It had its own culture of reasonable size. 30 aircraft is not too small, not too large. But it was really getting that preparation to grow. So quite a different experience than a startup where you just had barely a spreadsheet and you had to create something out of nothing. This is the dimensions that we're talking about here is more future-proofing the airline, that where you could do something on an Excel spreadsheet, as an example, like crew rostering because you're small, is no longer possible. You're having to invest in industrial-grade solutions and so forth across the board, maintenance, engineering, all this type of stuff. So it's that future-proofing of the airline that is the difference, I suppose, between the startup that I've been used to for the past decade, I suppose, and to what we're doing now.
Okay. And at Swoop, which is the Singaporean airline, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, absolutely.
Very successful. You said that I've read that over 50% of your early passengers were first-time flyers. Are you seeing the similar effects in Saudi as well? And how are you encouraging people to use the airline?
Very much. We have a lot of first-time flyers. We have a lot of commuters. So a good example is a lot of companies are relocating or starting up in Riyadh. But we have a lot of people that live all over the kingdom, particularly Jeddah, where we're based. And there's this commuter base that literally just goes, the typical Monday to Friday. Here it's Sunday to Thursday. They'll spend the weekend here with their families. They have their house here, and then they commute up on us, and they go back and forth. There's people that I've met that have over 100 sectors, 100 flights with us in 1 year, which puts me to shame. I thought my 40 or 50 was pretty good, and what have you. But these guys are true road warriors, where they're going back and forth between cities. Particularly what I would call the commuters, who are, again, they've got their own personal circumstances somewhere else in the kingdom. So we have that. That didn't really exist 5-10 years ago. Again, it's just the way that the country has been shaped. Second thing is we have a lot of first-time flyers. So a lot of, the reality is a lot of laborers, a lot of pilgrims that are coming into the country, particularly elders. This is their big journey of their lifetime. All first-time flyers. So we've got to cater to those market segments as well. So we have everything from the road warrior commuter that I was talking about to the holidays, to all the way through to particular customer segments like religious and worker traffic that we have to handle within a very simplified working environment. We are an LCC. We don't have a huge bandwidth of resources, and we're trying to cater for quite a significant or wide variety of customer segments.
Right. And I've flown your airline twice now. I've just booked it again from Riyadh to Dubai. I was trying to get back to Jeddah, actually, as another journey, but doesn't seem you're flying to Jeddah at the moment from Dubai.
Not yet. No, not yet.
But you're currently looking at going from 30 to 100 destinations. Is that right?
Yes. So currently, 80% of our flying is domestic. We're very much a domestic carrier. That was the genesis of the airline. 20% is international. Most of that growth, destinational growth and so forth over the next couple of years, where all our aircraft predominantly are going, is international. So I forecast within 2 years' time will be 50-50. 50% of our traffic will be international. 50% will be domestic. We'll continue growing domestic for sure, but there comes a point where there's only so many destinations we can serve domestically. And so we've just launched Alexandria in Egypt as an example, Sabiha as the second airport in Istanbul as an example, only in the past 2 weeks. So you'll see most of the growth, that destinational growth that you referred to, which is our target, is mostly going to be international and filling in the gaps. Dubai, as an example, we serve DWC. The secondary airport, soon to become the primary airport in, say, 5 to 10 years, but also DXB in terms of Dubai as well. So that type of growth pattern will continue, quite strongly over the next couple of years.
Right. And with the massive transformation in aviation and tourism under Vision 2030, what excites you most about this journey, and how is flyadeal contributing to turning these ambitious goals into reality?
Yeah, I think everyone talks about the targets, and they're important, but I think to me what is really meaningful is the cooperation that you have in the ecosystem, which is one of the reasons we're interested in the conference. But what I find phenomenal here is the whole ecosystem is coming together to work out, okay, we have these phenomenal goals to achieve in Vision 2030. And every year we do really well, and then the government decides to double them or triple them. It never slows down. The targets has become even more challenging, but that's fine. But the ecosystem actually comes together. What I've found in other jurisdictions overseas and stuff is aviation is demonized. You have to look at Amsterdam in terms of Schiphol and Holland and so forth as an example, where that was a leading connecting airport, and now there's been cuts in terms of accessibility and slots and everything, which is truly tragic for the Dutch economy. You don't have that here. You have aviation as an absolute key initiative to be able to achieve some of the goals in terms of Vision 2030. And as a consequence of that, what you see is us working very, very closely with airports, ground handlers, and others within the ecosystem to try to get this to work. So much so that we're included in master planning activities for the airports, as an example. That's very rare. I've worked all over the world, and typically airports just come and say, "Look what we're building, isn't this wonderful?" It's like, well, that's not fit for purpose. Here, we're deeply integrated in that planning ethos. So for me, it's that's exciting. It's sort of the backroom stuff that people don't talk about. They love to talk about the targets. They love to talk about big terminals or whatever the infrastructure pieces. And I'm not belittling any of that. I think that's very exciting. But for me, it's that back office stuff where you've got all of those parts coming together and talking about how we're going to achieve this, how are we going to get there, because the demands on us are huge, the targets are huge, the aspirations are huge. Nothing wrong with that, but we've all got to. We can't work in silos and achieve this. It's just going to be impossible. So that's happening in the background. It's not spoken of that much, but it's something that I think is very refreshing, given I've worked, in many parts of the world, and that just simply doesn't happen.
Yeah, that collaboration. It was interesting. I just read about that in the press the other day about Virgin and BA coming together and speaking about the importance of the airlines getting more involved in the development of Heathrow as opposed to it being a monopolistic situation as it is now.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I mean, the typical relationship with an airport is they'll come up and they'll build this mausoleum, something that it looks beautiful, but it's just not functional in any way whatsoever. And I think, you have a look at Charles de Gaulle. Ben Smith is on the record saying it looks beautiful, the terminals looks functional, but they're not built to exchange customers, for transferring customers. They never were. It was always you're coming into Paris and you were greeted with this beautiful terminal. But Air France is a connecting airline, and so they've got something that's not fit for purpose. So we're working hard with the authorities here to be able to avoid those pitfalls and be able to get airports that are actually working for ourselves, for Saudia, for Riyadh Air, and also FlyNAS as well, because we all have different demands. We all see things differently. So we've got to have functionality that allows us to be able to support that.
What's a good benchmark for you in terms of airports around the world?
Changi. And I'm biased because, it was in my backyard for 8 years. I worked closely with Changi, and what is... that would have been 15 plus years ago. What they're building now, which is Terminal 5. We were looking at master planning 15 years back about, how are we going to fit in? Where we're co-locating. So Scoot was co-locating with Singapore Airlines, still is, that's the plan. But Scoot was a low-cost carrier. So what did we need? We're obviously very, very different. We didn't need lounges. We didn't need all the stuff, bells and whistles that Singapore Airlines had as a premium carrier. But, what did we specifically need, and what did we need to be able to how to integrate and exchange customers? And so that was 15 years ago, and they're building it now. So I'm really looking forward to them opening it so I can go down and try it out and see if those principles that we'd agreed all those years ago hold true, which I hope they will.
How interesting. Increasing your staff from 1,400 to 4,000, there must be a big focus on, of course, training, but also bringing in women into the aviation industry as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We're just shy of 50% in terms of women, female participation in our workforce. So we have quite a high number, which is really good. But another thing that sort of comes back to the ecosystem, Jonathan, that we're talking about is it extends to the Ministry of Manpower and so forth. A couple of examples, if I may. Number one, we have a cadet pilot program that is in Spain. We use a GTA as a provider to type rate people on our aircraft, pilots. That is being co-sponsored by the government. And, we're pushing through young Saudis, males and females, to get trained up overseas, to give them a bit of experience, and then bring them back and become first officers with the airline. That also programs extend to engineering, technical roles, cabin crew. We have a partnership with a local university here and so forth. So again, this extension of the ecosystem, they get to say, okay, we want you to double, triple, or quadruple in size, 100 aircraft, but we also know that labor is really key, and we want participation, particularly from Saudis, and get them technically trained. And so there's a number of schemes that we've been able to bring through. The interesting thing was I'm usually the lonely one at a conference where people say, I've got pilot shortages and everything. I'm going, I've got no problem. I've actually got too many people coming through the system at the moment. So I'm trying to catch up with aircraft. So we're in a very lucky position where they've thought end to end through and said, okay, there's obviously going to be demands for these technical skills, be it pilots or whatever the case may be. And we are being supported by the government and various other agencies to be able to bring people through, particularly Saudis and locals.
Looking at the whole digital transformation going on in aviation, how is it that you're taking a lead position in that particular area?
Yeah, I always sort of see us as a little bit bipolar. One is we're very digital. The vast bulk of the population is below the age of 30. Everyone's got 2 phones. Everything is done via app. If you're here and living in the kingdom, everything from buying a car to getting a bank account open, everything's got an app. Everything is digitalized, and you that's how you work with government travel, government portals and everything. My visa is on the app, et cetera, et cetera. So compare that to the UK where, you can't even get your power bill sorted out. Again, everything is just centralized here. And so that ethos has to carry through to everything else we do. So when we support commuters, all of this type of stuff, there's the expectation is that you offer all of your services, including a chat bot and everything. Everything is based on the app, and that's the way people interface with for pretty well everything that they do here. So that is something that we're completely focused on and trying to make it as seamless and as leading edge as possible. But literally the opposite end is true, and I have no shame in talking about this, but no one wants to talk about how digital they are. But we also have to cater for a very, very different market, the religious market. We've got people coming into the kingdom who do pilgrimages. This is potentially the once-in-a-lifetime activity. They're in their 70s or 80s typically, wouldn't even know how to turn on a mobile phone or ever had one before. And we've got to cater for that in terms of paper-based activities, working with travel agencies and tour operators, all of these things. So I'm proud to be a digital airline, but I'm also very open to say, look, we have to accept a range of customer segments, and we're having to adapt to these. We can't all just say, oh, please download the app, please, for your pilgrimage, and you'll do everything on that. It doesn't work that way. And for anyone who says it does, is not on the ground and seeing firsthand what's going on. So from that perspective, we have to be quite diversified in our approach in terms of digitalization, but also adapting to just local market trends and what requirements are, including visas, which some are still paper-based and quite restricted.
And in terms of, when EasyJet, and I sat beside Stelios back in the day when he was, he had launched EasyJet, but I'll never forget, he was on the airline sitting beside me and asking about, what I was doing. I'm flying on business, because at that point, it was mainly tourism and leisure travelers. And he was trying to grow the business traffic. Of course, he's done remarkably well with that, and as has Ryanair. Any learnings from those airlines? I mean, obviously, you had your experience at Scoop, but what about these European airlines and what they've done?
I think there's some who have done it successfully and some who have done it not so successfully. I think EasyJet has done it quite successfully, and they continue to do so. They continue to evolve. I don't know if you read about all the materials that came out about starting up a loyalty program proper now, because they want to take on the executive club, given the changes in the BA executive club. And I think they've got a real window of opportunity there to take yet another chunk out of full service carriers if they get the program correct. But the bottom line is, for all business travelers, and you know this yourself, you need a schedule. Flying to one place twice a week is not going to cut it. So for your key destinations, such as ours in terms of Jeddah, Riyadh, one of our key routes, 24, 25 flights a day each way. And so as I said, we're predominantly domestic at this moment, and we're increasing Dubai is 6 times a day, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're really trying to build on is very thick routes and building those out. So at the very least, you've got a morning, a lunchtime, and an evening flight. As a business traveler, you've then got choice in terms of how you actually do that. So your schedule is absolutely important, building that out, building that frequency and thickness. Second thing is then product. That comes in terms of fare product, flexibility. Even though you're a low-cost carrier, you can build in flexibility to one of your fare bundles and offering that, and all more meaningful stuff. So we have a flow forward or flexible fare that if let's say you've got your flight's booked at 4:00 and you finish at 12, you're at the airport, we can move you forward to an earlier flight for free of charge. It's actually to our benefit and to yours. Doesn't cost you anything, gets you home to see the wife and kids earlier. Doesn't cost us anything, but it's actually an upside because we're removing a seat that we can then sell on a later flight and putting you in a seat that's available at this moment in time that's going to go at 1:00, let's say, as well. So there's all these little tweaks that we continue doing. One final thing is subscriptions. We offer a subscription product. You subscribe, and you're entitled to 1, 2, or 3, or 4 flights a month. And these are for the commuters that I was talking about before for a whole year. And that is offered at a fixed fee, so you can budget, you know what it's going to cost you, and you've got a degree of flexibility there. So it's that schedule. You've got to start with the schedule. You've got to have something that's attractive. You've got to fly to destinations people want to go at a reasonable frequency. They've got flexibility. And then you're building all of that. And a lot of that comes from what we've seen with, European carriers and how they're tweaking, particularly EasyJet has gone for that more business slant as opposed to leisure. They're still heavily leisure for sure, but I think they've been more effective than most LCCs, really trying to adapt and attract that business segment.
And is that subscription model, is that the first in the industry?
No, a number of airlines around the world have done it. Alaskan, as an example, interestingly enough, pioneered it in North America. Wizz launched it before us, to be fair. I mean, they launched it a couple of months before us, albeit a different sort of a more hybrid version, as an example. So there are a number of examples out there, Volaris in Mexico and what have you. We all do it in our own different ways, and there's no right or wrong because we're just adapting to the local market. The vast bulk of the subscription or subscribers that we have, no surprise given what I've been talking about, Jeddah Riyadh. And so we can do a lot of interesting things there because we've got so many frequencies a day. And so our products are sort of tiered towards that as opposed to anything else. Funny enough, very few airlines have a route that has 25 frequencies a day. You can probably count them on both hands. It's quite rare. So we have to specialize or adapt to that in terms of what our product looks like.
Okay. And is there one innovation that you believe will define the future of aviation?
I think it would be remiss of me to say AI. I think there's a lot of hype about AI, but I do believe AI will lead to the next industrial revolution, so to speak. That we will change, and we already are changing the way we work because of AI. I don't think we've reached the pinnacle of that. I think we're far off, but I think that's the stuff that I'm looking at. I don't necessarily believe in the hype. Everyone's trying to sell you everything that will change your life overnight. There's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of stuff you need to push to the side. But I do believe progressively that we particularly are adapting. We've just launched our AI chatbot, and again, that's learning in itself. And then we learn off that, and then figure out how else we're going to adapt it. We use it as a decision support tool within our operational team downstairs, as an example about delays, cancellations, optimizing day of flight, and so forth. So we're looking at all of that and how we're adapting, and then changing the business accordingly. There's no use just putting an AI solution into the business and then not adapting and flexing the business and so forth as well. So I think that's going to be the true revolution over the next couple of years. It's gaining pace, but it's not going to be overnight like a lot of people promise you. There's a lot of learnings to be done, and also organizational changes to adapt to that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? And we've always looked to the aviation industry and the way you've communicated with your clients, and incorporating that sort of communication within the hotel industry, which typically will happen if you are part of their membership scheme, their loyalty scheme, but otherwise you may not have that because you're part of an OTA, you're coming through the agency, so you don't get that communication which you always provide to your clients, which is impressive. Stephen, one final question. You've worked across 4 continents and lived in many different places, as you mentioned earlier. But so there must be some great travel stories in there. Can you share a particular memorable experience from your global career?
I'm proud to be a Concorde customer. And so I was a lot younger and a lot darker hair, but the interesting thing, it was just after the Air France crash and what have you, and the Concorde came back, and I had a whole heap of BA points, and I went, bugger this, I'm going to use my points, because I couldn't afford it at the time, but pay cash. And 2 days after I'd actually got the frequent flyer ticket, and all booked and looking forward to it, so New York to London, they cancelled Concorde. And you couldn't get a ticket for love or money because everyone piled in to buy these tickets because this is the last chance you got. And here I was sitting on a frequent flyer ticket, premium. I probably should have sold the bloody thing, but in any case, got to fly on it. So it was probably one of my most luckiest punts. I just remember, here you were at over Mach 2, you could see the curvature of the Earth. You were 65,000 feet, and you literally couldn't lean against the wall of the aircraft. It was hot. And I'm a big person, so I was like sitting there because it's not a very big cabin, but I do remember it. And the captain came on, every 2 seconds talking about what was going on and this noise here because we're going to turn off this and we're going to put on the afterburners. And it was just such a memorable experience, and it was a party atmosphere. It really was. The funny thing was, I can't remember the captain's name, but he was one of the last who flew the last 3 Concordes into Heathrow. He came from Scotland. I think he left Glasgow, if I'm not mistaken. He took a detour and flew over his house and blew the windows out. And that around the neighborhood because he was going so fast. I mean, they weren't quiet aircraft. But I think out of all the things, I was just very lucky to right place, right time type of thing. And then, of course, they cancelled it, and that ticket was just the golden ticket that, I could have never imagined. And so I was just very lucky to tick that box. And I now see one sitting at Heathrow looking sad and lonely and feel very depressed because they were beautiful aircraft. And it was just such an experience. I can look back on that and say, I just wish I had my mobile phone with a camera and video. I would have been able to get so much more out of it, but all I had was a small digital camera. But there we go. Back in the day.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah, my father certainly went on the Concorde once, which he certainly enjoyed. And we growing up, my kids growing up, we were on the flight path to Heathrow, and whenever the Concorde came over, it was great excitement. Just that lovely sound as it came in, and that.
Yeah. Something special.
Something special, exactly. Well, listen, Stephen, fantastic. Really enjoyed my discussion with you, and thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, information, and wow, what an exciting journey you're on at the moment. And very much look forward to meeting you in person in a week's time.
Fantastic. Safe travels, and welcome to the kingdom. Hopefully the weather won't be too bad. It was a bit of a sandstorm going on in Riyadh overnight, actually. There were a couple of diversions and so forth, but hopefully that won't be the case when you come down.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Take care. Thanks very much, Jonathan.